All right, welcome to our elected member briefing. We'll hand straight over to Gary if you're ready, Gary.
Yeah, just bear with me 2 seconds. Yep. So yes, thank you. So Councillor McGregor asked that this item be discussed today in terms of the Register of Illegal Development. This is in relationship to the quarterly reporting that I've been providing to Council in the last 12 months. The question around particularly this particular item not being supplied as part of that report. I don't know, Councillor McGregor, if you want to speak to that first before I respond, but happy if you want to.
Yeah, look, I can. I mean, I've sort of yeah, I just sort of feel that the way it's sort of set out and the information is really good and valuable. I think that what I found is the majority of the complaints that I get or the inquiries I get from ratepayers and the community seem to be around development, whether it's illegal or not or whatever. So having had that from memory, it was just a really good resource to have I could go through and have a look at and just say, okay, that's outside the time frame, that's, so it won't be sort of enacted on quickly, or it's sort of something that is in the capable hands of the staff and sort of stuff like that. I know has sort of indicated that, maybe if we should be sort of contacting the staff and that, or the directors about it, but a majority of your time is taken up with us doing that, and so this would be a really sort of quick way, easy way to just go, the information's there, and have a look at it and stuff like that. So I don't think it needs to be out there in the public like it was before with all the detail on it. I think that that's a little bit not so good, but I think for all of us, I feel that it would be a good thing.
All right. So my response to that is that in the first instance, as soon as we provide you with that information, it'll be out of date. So the fact that we are providing it quarterly, things may move fairly quickly in some instances. So the status of individual compliance matters may have moved on from when you were provided that information. So my preference would be not to supply it for that reason. And secondly, because it does contain personal information about property owners that, could unfortunately get into the public domain. And I know that's not the intention, but unavoidably it may happen. So my preference would be to simply continue to simply provide statistical information on the number of compliance matters that are currently at the reporting period as to their status, and link to location only, not to providing individual address details. So I think there is a degree of caution in terms of the accuracy of data once it's been supplied, and the fact that at the end of the day, I think from a council perspective, it's just simply knowing that staff are progressing these things as rapidly as possible in line with the new service levels that will be adopted.
And look, I'll add to that. Obviously, it's quite an operational document. Councillor McGregor, Gary has noted, provides statistics. Look, if the elected members as a group do want to be provided that data, then we will. It's our recommendation is that we provide the statistics quarterly for the reasons that Gary's outlined. But obviously, I'd be interested in the feedback of the other elected members and Mayor Bailey on that. But as I said, we'll provide what is requested, but we don't want to do it if it's not of value and all of the elected members feel it's important.
My 2 cents worth are that I do also get a lot of inquiries on that. I try the standard report it this way, and a lot of people don't want to do that, and so continue to come back or get somebody else to call. If I had a list and I knew that address was at least on the list, it probably doesn't even matter what stage it was, whether it was out of date or what. I can say I do know that is on the staff's agenda and they are looking into it. So then at least I could push off some of those queries. And also I would hope add extra trust into the community that, you know, our staff are already on top of that before you've even told me. Whereas at the moment, I'm sending them all, you have to report, you know, things like that. So you might get heaps and heaps of the reports of the same thing. That's my 2 cents.
Other elected members, feedback or comments? Councillor Barber?
Yeah, well, I haven't really come across this that often. I did have one recently where somebody inquired about some works, and I'm not sure if I took the correct approach. I actually emailed Mark and just said, I've had these concerns. Are you aware of this situation? And I said, obviously he can't give me details, but he said, yep, no worries, we'll look into it. And yeah, so I don't know if that was the correct approach for me to take, but yeah, I just emailed Mark and just made him aware that people had concerns about work that was going on.
Other elected members' thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't particularly come across this directly myself. It may be that other elected members, depending on where they live, might be more exposed to that than I am living in the heart of Manham. I guess to me, it's more about just continuing to build, you know, some kind of an effective rapid response or effective response time, as always, to people's queries, so that people aren't still able to say, we sent in a query, we've not heard anything, we haven't even had an acknowledgement. Sometimes you even still get that. So it's just about part of that trust process, I think, in just making sure the systems acknowledge people's concerns when they send them in, which is what we've been advised to advise them. So it's a more general thing, perhaps, from my point of view, with how are people still feeling about and building the trust in the council and their response to queries by the public.
Yeah, personally haven't had anyone say anything or queries about that up here to me. I don't know about Kevin, but I haven't had anyone sort of ask questions about that. So.
Councillor Myers? You're on mute, Kevin.
Yeah, sorry about that. What I was saying was we used to have this sort of list in the past, and it was handy to the point which Mayor Simone actually just very word for word put there that, you know, if people rang you up and complained, you could actually look at the list and say, well, council's onto this. I think we'll leave it at that. And unless it gets out of control, then council would be monitoring anyway.
Thank you. And I also don't want to put you into difficult positions. If, you know, your response can be, then you need to direct that operationally to the staff. Then that also can be of assistance on occasions as well. Councillor Warhurst and Councillor Schultz.
Yeah, I was leaning towards keeping the approach uniform, as in if it's an operational decision, you know, of management, that if we're asked a question, we say, well, I'll ask the director and get back to you and leave it at that. Because if you've got different standards in different areas, well, it's going to get too confusing.
Thank you, Councillor Schultz.
I agree with Ros. I think if it's deemed operational, let's keep it a status quo.
Thank you, Councillor Warhurst. Laura, do you want to provide any commentary? You don't have to. Put you on the spot there. Anything else to add? All right, thank you for that. Look, I'll summarise that. I think there's an indication that the general statistics are what most of the elected members are supportive. Obviously, we'll provide data at any time that's asked for. And if there's difference of opinion, then we're happy to hear from that if that's what the elected members want. Councillor McGregor, do you want to?
I mean, for me personally, I think that would be helpful still. So I understand that some of the other elected members don't get as many inquiries as what I probably had and others do. And yeah, I mean, we get the EFT details and sort of stuff like that, and that's not for distribution and sort of stuff like that. Or even if it could be a place on the portal that we can sort of go in and actually, read only, just access it if we wanted to. So it's not about sort of generating it every 4 months, every quarterly. It's about we can sort of access in there because there's private parts on the portal that we can access. So I'd be happy if that could happen as well. So it means the information won't be out of date. And yeah.
Well, I don't think we're going to do that, Councillor McGregor, unless everyone wants that. And I don't think we would update it more than the quarterly if we did do that. So from my perspective, obviously put it respectfully to the group, is if it wasn't what everyone was looking for us to do, then we probably wouldn't be doing it for one or two individuals. But happy to hear some feedback from the group on that.
Ben, is the information readily available? That would be my sway. If it's available and it can just be sent out, if it is going to take staff time to put it together, then it will be a different response.
So at the moment, it is staff time putting that together.
So how do we keep the information at the moment on a different system and it's not easily downloadable?
Yeah, some of it will be kept in our record management system, but effectively at the moment, a lot of it's been kept in a spreadsheet. There's ease of access for staff, but it is, in terms of the actual records, it's within the Synergy system.
So it's already on a spreadsheet and available.
Well, the current report's been done as a spreadsheet. That's what was being received. So that was manually obviously created by the officers to update as part of the quarterly reporting.
Okay. So the one that Councillor McGregor sent around, the old one, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a spreadsheet. That's a spreadsheet, yeah. Yes.
So that's not generated at present, Gary. That was previously done.
Yes, so that it was, like I said, it was a spreadsheet that was manually maintained.
And not done at the moment.
It's been done in the moment because obviously we're providing the statistical information as part of our quarterly reporting, but we're not providing you with the details. So we are maintaining the spreadsheet for the purpose of providing statistical information.
Yeah, so it wouldn't take any time just to send it out to the few councillors that are interested in it.
No, it wouldn't.
But Simone, my approach with that is if something should be provided to everyone, or it shouldn't be provided. Well, yeah, not individually.
I guess my argument is if it's there and elected members think it would make their job easier and our trust and communication with our community easier, I can't see a reason why at least we wouldn't give it to elected members, but happy to hear the thoughts of everyone else.
If we were to provide the information, I would only be providing limited information, not what you received previously. I would strip it back down to the very basics, if that.
Mm-hmm.
So in effect, you'll get less than more.
Well, just to butt in, when I read that list that Kirsty sent out, a couple of those properties on that list, I said, look, it didn't give names or anything, but location. Yeah, I know exactly who and what. And I thought, well, that would probably be not really the right thing to be spreading around.
Yeah, and it makes sense why it's not in our council reports anymore.
All right. Well, yeah, unless there's a change of position, we'll provide the statistics. And obviously, Councillor McGregor, if you wanted to raise a motion on that, to have a formal council position on that being provided, then that's obviously your prerogative on that. So thank you for that discussion. The next item is the SWIMS submissions after the community consultation to Clive.
Thanks, Ben. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully everyone can. That's appeared. Okay, let me just minimize everyone. Okay, so it was deemed appropriate that in addition to the annual business plan and budget consultation, that a separate consultation be performed over and above. So council firstly approached the various shack associations to assist in the distribution of the information. Several association requested that council contact their members directly. So then council, with the contact details of emails that we had, we sent that information sheet out, and ones that we didn't have a email address, then we sent letters. So basically, I've just done a bit of a summary of the main items which kind of came out of it. You know, some people agreed with the intent of the charge. The majority disagreed that we received. They wanted the more explanation. They thought there may have been poor communication and governance. A few assumed that general rates were a fee for service when it's really the tax on their capital land valuation. They thought general rates should cover their CMWS expenditure, where in reality the CMWS is a separate charge that targets certain ratepayers. They felt they were misled by council with ongoing costs of the system. There were several which thought that small increases should be put over several years, so it's not as noticeable. General comments about where rates are going. Several brought up the fact that their schemes were in a surplus, so their argument was that these funds should be used in the first instance to finance. There was comments about in excess of unfair. They talked about cross-subsidisation is not permitted for ratepayers, so why should leaseholders have it? I wasn't sure. Some of these comments are kind of coming. There's a bit of confusion out there, I suppose. They thought that comparing, just as a benchmark comparison with what our average CMWS fees are compared to SA Water, were unfair, where I think they've kind of misunderstood that the economies of scales are with SA Water, and because we've got a lot of small schemes, our overheads are larger, and we start only with 6 connections. So if anything, our annual fee should be higher than SA Water's. A lot took it that there was a shot of leaseholders for some reason. We were targeting leaseholders. There was brought up that there's a number which are retired and it's got fixed income, so it's a bit of a hard and bit of pure tablet to swallow with large increases. Once again, they talked about why should indirect and admin costs be shifted towards leaseholders, where in reality what the full cost attribution is really just distributing across all our services. Whether they're leaseholders or whether it's garbage collection, whether it's community services, whether it's being tourism, it's just a distribution of those charges. Many thought there was inadequate consultation period for such a large change in the fee settings. Pretty well the same here. There was some good positive ones where they talked about full cost recovery, and council should follow through with a service audit to ensure that services like value for money is being delivered inside. Talked about cross-subsidisation principles consistently and fairly across all service users, and that's really what full cost attribution is doing. Few pointed at a review of services, so they brought in other areas such as garbage collection and their road conditions, etc. There was some comments about who owns the CMWS system and how much of that would have been gifted previously. There was, a bit of misunderstanding, like who receives the depreciation on the assets, probably the council. So once again, there's this misconception that council are screwing away some of the income where we're actually putting it all into the scheme funds. There was more indications about council exploring existing financial resources, and I imagine that was looking at grants, etc., which isn't available for the renewal of assets, unfortunately. The last one I've got there is considering a sinking fund and high interest accounts for each system, which once again is really part of the discussion that I have going onwards. So, so what we've had is just trying to. The Local Government Association has just recently released a new draft version of the CMWS accounting principles that now states where it really supports the continual recovery of full cost attribution of internal appropriate amounts of internal indirect overhead costs that were previously not recovered in our case. With asset renewal, now they've actually stated that the previous guidelines recommended annualised operating costs include an estimation of depreciation for all council CMWS assets. Advice has now been received from SCOSA, which indicate under the National Water Initiative pricing principles, which we should be adhering to as much as possible, for the portion of assets that have been gifted to councils should not be included in the operating costs for determining charging calculations. Then the paper continues and to go on to say, but not including depreciation of any gifted assets in costs to determine charging would mean that council would not have accumulated all funds necessary to accommodate asset renewal and when warranted in the future. So there's a bit of a contradiction where they're saying now not to recover depreciation, but then the paper says, well, but you won't have enough money when renewals come along. So, so in receiving that information, what's now mooted in or recommended that future funding requirements can be calculation of like a capital renewal annuity being the financial mechanism which is used in a lot of the regulated industries like utilities, electricity, water, to manage the recovery costs of replacing and maintaining assets over lifespan. So basically involves calculating annual payments in the future before the renewals occur to represent the present value of the asset replacements in the future. So what we're doing is spreading the costs once again more evenly over time rather than having a large fluctuation in prices due to when those capital expenditure or capital renewal expenditures occur in the future. So instead of like taking the annual depreciation, it's more of like looking into the future, what are the amounts and how far are they in the future? So what would we need to put into a fund or have accumulated within the CMWS scheme fund to generate enough surplus to cover those. So it's kind of like it's budgeting for the future, basically, based on the asset renewals that will occur in the future. So So what is it? It's an annuity-based approach. So instead of treating capital costs as a lump sum, when they're being replaced, the capital renewal annuity converts those costs into a series of regular payments or annuity spread over the asset's life. So that smooths out the costs, making it more predictable for consumers and budget and know what they're actually up to. So it focuses on the asset life cycle, and it considers the entire life span of each individual assets and not just the initial purchase or installation at one particular time in the future. Why is it used? It assists the financial management of the utility or the council by providing more predictable revenue stream to fund the future capital expenditure. So we're going to build up the CMWS, each CMWS individual fund with enough money to cover those planned renewals in the future. So it gives us pricing predictability, which helps being a more stable, predictable prices for customers. So we don't have these big, large increases when, let's say, for instance, the main tank of the wastewater treatment plant needs to be replaced. So, and it falls in line with the regulatory framework and also SCOSA. So, yeah, that's the pluses, I suppose, that we're talking about.
And Clive, that's essentially what SA Water would be doing, isn't it? We pay a same fee every single year, and then they put it up slightly so that when they have to change the Manning wastewater plant, none of us have to pay any extra.
Yeah, that's right. So their pricing is probably a lot more simplistic. You know, we've got 28. I can't remember how many they've got, but they basically only have got two different prices. One for country or non-metro CMWS system. So they basically, I suppose, they don't look at each scheme individually. They look at all their capital requirements in the future, and that's what they would be exactly doing. So it's more or less will be coming in line with what they would be currently practicing. So if we look at the present financial situation of the CMWS, and it's probably, I've got a few points here, and it makes it pretty complex and probably a bit unstable, I suppose, at the moment might be a good word to say. We've got 28 CMWS schemes. Each of them have individual settings of an annual fee, so that makes it really complex. As I was saying with SA Water, they just have two, which are quite simple, country and metro. We've got a broad range of CMWS scheme fund balances. As at the 30th of June 2024, we had one which has got $113,000 deficit, and we had another one which is $175,000 surplus. So total CMWS fund balances at the 30th of June 2024 was $773,000. In the previous year, 30th of June 2023, it was just over $1 million. So we kind of saw roughly about $250,000 slip away from our fund balances. That's partly due to probably the impact of the floods and some of the damage received. Then I follow on with the next point. Potentially, the CMWS schemes will receive income of about $143,000, not quite the difference between the 2 years. And that's recruitment, which will come from the disaster recovery funding. Total payments should be received probably in the next 3 to 4 months. We expect the final acquittals to be completed. Only then the actual amounts to be received or received against each scheme will be known. So that will possibly change quite a few scheme balances. In particular, Kawira's got a considerable amount to be credited to it. And look, there's others as well. So on top of that, we are now looking at implementing a capital renewal annuity, model. So that will probably require us to do a bit more work and forecast our annual asset renewal beyond the current 14 years that we've got in the asset management plan. So basically we had 15 years previously. We've used 1 year. There's only 14 years. So I might actually have to sit down and do some calculations and get probably the next 30 years to get a reasonable spread of years and calculate what the future liabilities. The issue is if you always pick a reasonably short period, so you might pick 10 years, there's always on the 11th year, there may be a big amount. So including additional years gives it added complexity, but more assurancy that nothing is just over the horizon. So unfortunately, the paper that's coming out from the LGA about the costing principles doesn't really outline what a capital renewal annuity model should look like. But I've been doing a bit of research, and I'm sure that I can create one. But I'll need, obviously, I need to get a bit more information. So going forward, I suppose taking into account the feedback received from the public consultation and the recent advice from the LGA as far as their information paper, management will prepare setting the annual CMWS service fees on the following principles: full cost attribution, that is a requirement of current legislation, and also has been recommended by our external auditors, will be phased into the next year's 2025-26 CMWS annual service fee. The annual depreciation component will not be incorporated in next year's CMWS annual service fee, but we will implement a capital renewal annuity component, and that will be introduced in 2026-27 CMWS annual service fee. We still want to recover all our budget operating costs, and including for 2025-26, we have got an additional one full-time equivalent CMWS officer, and the operational costs of a new trailer-mounted evacuator for desludging, cleaning, and the flushing of rising and gravity mains. So previously, the council has relied on external contractors to perform this desludging and cleaning of the main lines, and it's only been done not on a regular maintenance, but more on a requirement. So we've been reactive, where by actually having an extra CMWS officer and this new piece of equipment, we will be putting that into like a regular maintenance cycle of all our lines, which hopefully will definitely improve the performance of flow and also downtime with our schemes in that area. And the approximate cost of that is about 125,000. So if you do your fast calculations, 125,000 divided by 1830 connections, 1,830 connections, is just under $70 per connection. That works it out. And the last point would be consideration we've given to the schemes with large deficits, which may need an increase. And probably I will also look if anyone's holding a very large surplus, and other schemes that have previously been funding depreciation in their annual service fee. So I might just twig in 2025-26 Kawira and also Truro in not giving them such a large, a lower increase than probably the other schemes, because they have been recovering their full amount of depreciation. Oops, sorry, I've been a bit quick, and I just saw a hand go up then as well. I'll just stop sharing and come back to anyone who wants any questions.
I just wanted to go back to that last slide, Clive, about this financial year. So we know that it's costing ratepayers, general ratepayer, about 350,000, and we're not going to charge any of the SIMS accounts this year, apart from that one officer. I thought there was a motion to have it all implemented by April. I could be wrong.
Well, Clive's bringing that up, and he'll clarify. So the full cost attribution will be implemented. What Clive's suggesting is we don't do the depreciation. that was suggested as part of the consultation process while we do the further work on the annuity process. Is that?
I agree with that for the depreciation, but that last slide basically said we're not going to do the full cost attribution until next financial year. And I thought we had a motion that said from April this year, as in full cost attribution for the whole of council.
Yep. So,
I just find it very unfair that we know it's been a problem for all this time, and now we still know it's a problem, and we've worked out what it costs to generate pay, but we're still not going to put it on this year when we can.
No. So it's my intentions to bring full cost attribution in 2025-26, and what I'll actually do, I'll retrospectively, I will place full cost attribution to our current, well, sorry, not the current year now, after midnight last night, into 2024-25. So full cost attribution will be applied across all our functions,
including swims.
Yep,
for the last financial year that just ended yesterday.
Yeah. So then, yeah, the point is, I suppose, to what degree should it be actually? So previously, the proposal was that we would phase it in over a number of years, like we would charge CMWS as a function of council, but then I suppose the decision is how much of that full cost attribution should be charged to the individual schemes. And my recommendation previously was to phase it in over a period of 5 years. Now, I'll say that in that would allow council to do some benchmarking against other councils and possibly even get someone in independently to look at the assumptions that's been made. With looking at different councils, there's a whole lot of variances, let's say, with the full cost attribution, mainly because there's probably two different degrees. One council may just look at spreading their full cost attribution or their internal support services, I like to call them, like HR and payroll, and they just base it on something very simplistic, like the total amount of capital expenditure of each function or activity, whatever you want to call them. I've gone into quite a lot of detail because I know that it will be looked at very much a great degree and possibly scrutinised. So a couple of those, assumptions may require, some tuning over a number of years. So I think probably our new auditors may be very interested in our full cost attribution, and I imagine that in the new financial year, or the year we're in, just started now, they will be very, it'll give us some good feedback on it. So full cost attribution to be included, but phased in over a number of years. So whether we phase that in over 3 or 5 years, previously I've put in the documentation that would be phased over 5 years. So we would actually charge CMWS, but we wouldn't. We would only charge each scheme in the first year 20%, and then the next year 40%.
Okay, so the balances of that 700 and whatever that you said there this year will just come down more, and then we'll work it into the fees over time.
Yep, correct.
Yep. Oh, happy with that.
Yeah, so the full cost attribution will be phased in over 5 years. That's what you've prepared the budget on, Clive.
Yep.
The costs associated with the additional resource and also the vacuum excavator would be allocated in this financial year, or the new financial year that started today. The depreciation would not be, you will do some further work on that and then look to phase that in the next financial year.
Yep, the following financial year, and obviously we would have another public consultation. We would and then allow feedback. So then we could probably start that public consultation probably in about possibly like in 6 months' time.
Thank you. Happy with that. I guess my other point was just going to note that the misunderstanding or misinformation that the ratepayers have about SWIMS, I'd really love, and I mentioned it in the workshop and I think the council meeting, to David from LGASA. I'll work a sort of a fact sheet, like almost like what Dave's done for his works area, just so that people have a full understanding. It's got to be really simple, but yeah, just that it isn't a council responsibility. It's something we do to service you, and we don't do it for our whole council area, and that's why those charges can't be going to the full council area.
Yeah, I agree. The more you talk, more you talk about this, the level of understanding gets higher, and the more acceptance. It's you need to, knowledge is power, and and people need to be able to debate and talk about it, and the full cost attribution is a requirement of legislation. So in one instances, we have actually not fulfilled our requirement as a council by not following the legislation.
Yeah,
So, Clive, I think
sorry.
just a summary before I go to the group. We've listened to the feedback around concerns from the users of the SWIMS, and as a result, you'll do some further work on the depreciation. So that'll reduce the cost increases for this financial year. But we're still going to allocate, because of the legislation and appropriateness, because the whole rate base shouldn't be subsidising this, the full cost attribution phased in over the 5 years, and those specific costs in the current financial year. So questions, I think, sorry, that was that Mandy, and then Councillor Schultz.
Yeah, look, I was just going to say, I think that's a really good response to the concerns expressed, and it's made it really clear to me that not everybody understands fully the whole system, and it's changing again. So of course, yeah, further consultation with Q&As or something like that to explain this new scheme and what it actually means to people would be really the way to go. And I think that's great, Clive, what you're planning.
Thank you, Mandy. Ros?
Yeah, was the additional full-time equivalent SWIMS officer, was that factored into this current year's budget or not? And if not, would some of the annual depreciation that's not going to be incorporated, would that cover that extra wage?
So yes, it was always incorporated, and the piece of machinery was purchased probably 3 or 4 months ago, working up to it. So probably a good point, Councillor, in relation to depreciation, because what we actually have is what we're trying to do is trying to have a break-even result in our operating in our net operating. But then we're actually saying with CMWS, you don't need to have, we don't need to cover the depreciation. So what you're doing is overcompensating or trying to over recover in other ways, because you in the operations of CMWS, because of the pricing principles, they're saying don't fund your depreciation. But when we look holistically about the council, we are trying to cover it. So I had a discussion with Ben earlier today. With our financials, we'll make an adjustment, and the adjustment occurs in our net operating result, and it's in, I can't remember what note, it's in the statement of uniform presentation of finances. That's where you can actually make adjustments for mistiming of income or expenses. You're trying to normalise the results of council, so it gives a true and proper display of the true underlying result of council. Because we're treating CMWS in this way, and we have to because of the pricing principles, I'm actually saying, or I'll be pushing with the presentation of our finances at the end of the financial year to say that we need to discount the amount of expenses as far as CMWS depreciation, because we're not in operations, we're not trying to cover it. So what we need to do is not try and recover it in our financials. So it's kind of like, you know, and I can't remember what the amount is. It's you know, it would be about $300,000. We'll discount that amount in our finances by making an adjustment to our operating surplus deficit result. Yeah, it's when you'll see the statements, it'll be very clear. So basically we say, here's all our income, here's all our expenditure, and then what we'll say, we want to adjust we want to reduce the depreciation of CMWS because they're not truly recovering it. So then we kind of come out with an adjusted result.
We'll talk that through, Clive, at the time. Clive, the only other question I have, and if there's any other questions, is so from a budget that we've proposed prior to the consultation period, there's no impact on what you're proposing with deferring the depreciation discussion to what that looks like, other than reducing the increases in SWIMS charges to those schemes this financial year. So I think it was proposed to be 47%, and so now that'll reduce because you're going to deal with the annuity over the next 12 months.
Yeah. So you know, each connection, like yeah, there's a couple of complex things happening all of a sudden that this money is coming back now from the claims that we've done with our disaster recovery, and about $140,000 coming back to CMWS. So until that kind of reconciliation happens, it's very hard to really know what the true balance is of each fund, and that will only clarify in the next 3 or 4 months. As far as all the adjustments and how that affects the budgeting, I've got a considerable amount of adjustments, and I must say a large number of those are very favourable, such as, you know, the advanced financial assistance grants money, 50% or roughly about 50% of that coming into June. That just by that, the interest savings is just over $50,000 because that money's come to us in advance. And also on the 30th of June, we received over $3 million of disaster recovery funding. And I've calculated like an additional amount yet to come. And I've been reasonably conservative with that because there may be a number of items within that claim which will be pushed out. So overall, I don't think making this change to CMWS, because I've got a lot of favourable adjustments, I don't think it's going to overall change very much the projection of our finances to become sustainable in 2 years.
Thank you, Clive. Any questions? A lot of information there, but I think that was a good outcome from the feedback that we've received, what Clive's proposing. Councillor Barber?
Yeah, I've just got a couple of questions for Clive. One is probably, I'm a little bit naive. The difference between leaseholders and ratepayers, that was mentioned quite a lot, and I don't understand the difference there. They're saying that they're paying heaps more in rates, and I just can you try and clarify that for me at all, Clive?
Can I clarify that? No, there is no difference between a ratepayer and a leaseholder. We do not treat them differently. You know, their property is valued, and you know, and once again, general rates is a taxation on the value of your land. So there is no difference where, you know, we don't treat them any differently. They may feel that way, but we don't.
And just to go on top of that, Jeff, the only reason they're referred to as leaseholders is that's the structure of when their association was set up. For example, Brenda Park or Scotts Creek, where there's actually, in some instances, only one leasee, and that's the association. And then all of the properties in that are leaseholders of that association. So that's more their terminology than ours. As Clive's pointed out, they are property, they're valued, and they are a ratepayer. So I think it's more their terminology than anything.
And each of them gets a separate rate status, don't they? Just like you and I would.
Yeah. we don't invoice the association, the incorporated body, and then they don't pass it off to the leaseholders. We rate each of those individual properties.
My
And I
other
guess-
question was, sorry.
I was
my
going to say the
question
other point. The other point with that, Jeff, is that, you know, a lot of them own houses in the city. And as you know, the city has a lot cheaper rates, and that's part of that fight that we've been doing for better funding so that we can have more fair rates.
Yeah, yeah. My other question was, I know that they've been throwing, there's in the submissions, there was a lot of talk about the percentage of the increase, but I was just wondering, Clive, if you're able to break it down into what the average dollar increase is roughly, just like a ballpark figure of what the average dollar increase would be amongst the different systems. Because I know like 47% sounds like a lot, but you know, does that equate to like $200 per property owner or what?
So we're now not looking at that percentage increase. You know, so first of all, we're looking at an increase of just under $70,000 to have that additional full-time equivalent and start operating that machinery to, you know, clean out all the main lines. The full cost attribution, look, I'll have to take that on notice of, I was trying to do the calculations before the briefing, but I hadn't quite finished it. So I can give you some very average, but the problem is, once again, I can tell you, like, we've got this huge change between some which have got running deficits and some running quite high surpluses. Like Blanchetown, off the top of my head, has got quite a large surplus. So the adjustment required to them taking into the surplus, I might moderate a bit. But previously talking about when we compared our average CMWS charge to SA Water, I think there was a difference of about $150 around that, and we were looking at increasing previously around $200 per connection, but we're not doing that now. So I would say it's going to be probably on an average, probably definitely more than 70. It'll be probably about $100. But what I'll do some very rough calculations and send them through, and it'll be once again on an average. And then, as I always say, there's no such thing as an average. Some will be higher and some will be lower. But I can do a rough calculation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We're terribly behind time, but hopefully that was a good overview. Really important to receive the feedback that we did from that targeted consultation process. You'll be provided a what you heard report and all the summary, and all of that feedback received as part of the council agenda in July to make sure it's tabled. All right, we'll move on to Clive's next presentation, which is on drought rates relief, including a proposal that we've received from the LGA.
Okay, let me just find that one. Unfortunately, I think I might have closed it by mistake. Okay. Get back. Okay. Probably a bit of a background. What I've done with this slide is, previous relief that council provided. So during COVID and more recent the flood event, we gave some short-term financial assistance. Back in August 2021, council waived all fines to ratepayers for the month of September, and that was when the shutdown occurred for individuals to assess their financial situation and make appropriate financial arrangement. Then council allowed by application for a repayment scheme for the rate instalment due in September. They could actually extend that and only pay regular payments up to the 10th of December, and there was no fines or interest waived on that. Move on. Okay. Then during the flood event in December 2022, council waived all fines and interest for ratepayers for a 3-month period. That was between December and February 2023, once again to assess their individual financial situation and make appropriate financial arrangements. Then ratepayers of residential properties which have been materially inundated by floodwaters could, and where it was the primary place of residence, they could have a repayment plan for up to the 30th June 2023. So that gave them a total of 7 months. And then also we did waive CMWS management fees where they weren't operational. And also we gave ratepayers of commercial, industrial and primary production properties where they'd been inundated by floodwaters, also the 7 months up to the 30th of June 2023 to repay that year's rates with no interest or fine. So we had some people who said, well, we've got money coming very close to 30th of June. We said, look, just give us some very minor payments, whether it's $50 a month, just that you've made some minimal commitment, and then they would give, some of them gave a bulk payment just prior to the 3rd of June, which worked out really well. So what were the characteristics? Waiving for a short period of time with COVID, 1 month extending up to 4 months. We had very simple application form, which allowed the extended time. Council made no financial analysis on eligibility. The only thing we did was check that their property was within the flood footprint, and also it was their prime place of residence. It was based on very simple principles, which allowed us to quickly process it. We weren't bogged down with administration. We didn't have to do calculations. We didn't have to do any analysis of their finances, etc. In both instances, council did really only receive very limited applications, and there was minimal financial impact. So look, we gave short-term relief with council extending repayment plans, and they all commenced and ended in the same financial year. So there wasn't this stagger on or knock-on effect from one financial year to another. So what's other councils done? So majority of the rural councils are redirecting inquiries to the Government Drought Assistance Fund, or we've got a dedicated page on our website. The only council which has done something material is Coorong Council. They've decided to give a deferral of rates across prime production properties and also business, which are connected or reliant on prime production for income. They've got a special clause in their debt recovery and financial hardship policy. Basically, it allows them to declare a situation, in this instance, a drought. So this will now allow their ratepayers to defer rates for 12 months. And also there's another point which allows the ratepayer then to enter into a payment agreement without penalty or interest up to 24 months. So in reality, what they've done is allow up to 3 years of basically nearly non-payment of rates. So there's no framework around which I can find whether there's a minimum payment in the last 2 years. They've probably opened the gates quite wide and for a very long period of time. In addition to that, just at the bottom of that screen, they've allowed livestock grazing on roadsides. They've got appropriate warning signs and insurance, and they've allowed free access to water from their standpipes until September 2025, and also move that the council explore facilitating cost-effective methods to bringing fodder deliveries into the district. However, the last motion was lost, I think. Our financial overview, I just did a bit of quick modelling. So the total amount of net rates after rebates, which were raised in this, like the 2024-25 financial year, was $17.3 million. Primary reductions, general net rates was about 4.82 million, or 28% of that. I did a bit of a snapshot of primary reduction arrears, and these were the closest dates I could get to line up from one year to another. On the 17th of July, primary reduction arrears was just over 700,000, and on the 26th of June, they've increased to 860,000, or an increase of about 23%. So we have seen an increase in the arrears of primary production generates. So what I did was then some quick modelling, assuming that 95% of primary reduction properties apply and are eligible, and let's say over 5 years, this is just aligning with what Coorong had let go. The additional estimated cost of loans, so we wouldn't get that money. So the 3 years of primary reduction rates would be worth $32 million, or on an average $10.6 million each year. So we would actually, if we didn't get that $32 million, obviously it kind of grows over that period of 3 years, we would have an additional interest of loans of about $1.57 million. And then I thought, well, that might be a bit high. Then I did another assumption: if only 60% of properties apply and were eligible over 3 years, the additional estimated cost of loans would peak at about 2.2 million, or average 6.7 million, or we would have an interest bill of just under $1 million, $990,000. So, council previously have stated that they are financially unable to materially support affect landowners during period of natural disasters such as fires, floods, and droughts. This has traditionally been seen as the other two tiers of government, state government and the federal government. In the situation of drought, the state government works with the Australian government to deliver drought disaster and rural support through to the farmers, and that comes from there's a $5 billion fund of the Future Drought Fund, which is designed to enhance drought resilience and preparedness for farms and communities. That's more putting in like a bit of continuity or effects to investing to reduce the effect of droughts. Then currently what's happening is they're giving farm household allowances, concessional loans, and drought community programs, and council. Obviously, there's also been a limited amount of grants where we've actually received some grants directly, or some payments for rates directly from the state government. And I think I've discussed before, it's very dependent on the farmer going to the state government and saying, I want a couple, yes, you're eligible, and I've got a couple of bills outstanding, and it mightn't be always council rates. They might be asking to pay school fees or electricity bills. So what's proposed, and there was a small PDF document which talked about the LGA, and they're doing a proposed deferral of council rates. This proposal includes a simple, low formality application process, which would just ask for a property identification code. Land to be deferred would be land which is rated as primary reduction. If an applicant was prime producer on eligible land. The LGA is proposing that the rates be deferred up to a period of 3 years, with a maximum of $50,000 per ratepayer. If council granted deferral pursuant to the scheme, the state government would provide councils to cover the total cost of the shortfall. We borrow our money from the Local Government Financing Authority, and that would be the authority which would provide council with the offsetting funds, and they would administer the scheme. So basically, the state government would provide funds via this Local Government Financing Authority to cover the cost of the scheme. My understanding that would mean that if we deferred rates of, let's say, $1 million worth of prime reduction rates, the LGFA would give us $1 million to offset that lack of money coming in. So overall, the $1 million that they would give us would offset the $1 million that we lacked in cash flow. And then at the end of the deferment, they would ask for their $1 million back, and we would actually stop. They would start charging fines and fees, fines and interest on amounts outstanding. But while we actually had that equivalent fund equal to the amount of overdue rates for prime production, we wouldn't charge them interest or fines because we're no worse off. So there was a number of questions, and I've put a number of suggested answers against those questions. So the first one, would your council be supportive of a rate deferral proposal? And obviously I put the answer of that to be yes. Would the council be supportive of a state-funded council rate rebate scheme offering a reduction in rates for eligible ratepayers? So instead of giving this rate deferral, I think that one of the state departments have said, well, why don't we just give councils some money, and then that money gets credited onto their rate assessments. So my answer to that is really, it's very difficult to answer as the level of rebate hasn't been discussed. But yes, if they're not going to give us a deferral, a rebate would be better than nothing, basically. Then question 3, in your opinion, would a rate rebate or a rate deferral scheme be more effective? My thoughts are a rate deferral scheme would give primary producers a known period of time that they would not have to they would not required to make any rate payments without any financial penalties. So it would give them a period of time where they know that they don't have to worry about paying any council rates. If the proposal goes ahead for 3 years, they can say, look, I don't have to worry about paying any council rates until the end of 3 years. At that period of time, hopefully I've got enough money, or I've arranged some other way of making the payments. So to me, a rebate, just getting a rebate, doesn't really stop a certain amount of rates going overdue, and possibly council charging the prime producer penalties and fines against that. Where if you've got a rate deferral scheme, there's a guaranteed period of time where the farmer can plan and not have to worry about rates. Question 4, do you believe either of these proposals would provide meaningful relief in managing hardship? I said yes to both, but the council would look at preferring a rate deferral, the rate deferral proposal. And the last, well, I'm not sure this is the last question, I think it's the second to last. Would your council require any support in implementing a rate deferral scheme? I've said yes, we'd like public awareness of the scheme through state media. We would like a standard application template and related information or a fact sheet to be designed to enable consistency and stop confusion across the rural sector and any financial support services that they use. Council would then use this as a basis for a direct mail up to prime producers. I imagine that we would have to facilitate the sending of those applications. The only other concern I've got is our present corporate rating system mightn't be able to readily provide the required reporting information, but in the same way, they haven't really said what information would be required from council. So there's just a bit of, possibly the council may need assistance in that area. Keeping in mind that probably there's only probably 4 main software systems that all the councils use. Obviously, they just have to look at that issue over those 4 different pieces of software. Number 6, would either of these initiatives support your council budgeting? Rates deferment in budgeting and financial reporting, council would need to make appropriate notes to advise readers that the reduction of cash flow rate receipts and increase of rate debtors balances and the increased borrowings has been resolved with the drought relief. We just have to make some notes in our finances. So the drought relief deferment of rates assist both the primary producers and the council with their future financial sustainability by the state government funding the servicing of any additional council borrowings. So the impact to council's long-term financial plans shouldn't be impacted, pending that the end of the scheme, all the primary producers have the capacity to repay the additional rates accumulated during the 3 years of the scheme, if that's what ultimately gets approved. And with the rates rebate, I've put there unable to comment as details regarding the level of rebates are unknown. Will the rebate represent a certain percentage of the annual rates? Council will need to decide on how to treat properties or the debt collection that have received a rebate but still may be overdue. And just in question 7, any further comments? Just with the rebate scheme, really our corporate software only allows the option to both suspend both the monthly fines and interest on each individual property. So if a rebate scheme is only implemented the council and council only wishes to charge, let's say, interest and not fines. So give you just a very quick overview that if an instalment falls overdue, there's a penalty of 2% on that amount for that quarter, and then interest is charged at the amount of what we would normally borrow plus 2% on top of it. So it's just that it makes it very hard for previously when we've had COVID and the flood, it was very easy just to flick a switch basically on individual properties and say, look, we don't want fines and interest on either individual properties or at the start of both of those periods, we didn't have fines or interest on any of the properties. So last note there, deferment of rate payment. I put there the proposal at the stage lacks details in regards to the requirements, calculations, and processing that would be required. So basically, from what they give us, sometimes the devil's in the detail. We would be looking at hopefully something which is, like we put in previously with COVID and the flood, very easy to administrate, very easy to maintain. It's very clear and transparent for both council and also, in this instance, the primary producers. I think that's, so Mid-Murray customer service staff being direct inquiries to the drought assistance funds. We've uploaded the details of the $55 million supporting fund package. The LGA has got this drought relief proposal for council rates. The council consultation, basically those questions that we've gone through, closed on the 7th of July 2025. It's expected that the proposal would be probably presented to the Treasurer. By my understanding, he hasn't seen any of this by the end of July, and possibly the LGA could possibly receive a response in August sometime. So, just to put you on notice that council has received the first written request from a owner of primary production. asking for deferral of the payment of rates. So presently, this one application being given a deferral of the rates until council can consider their options going forward. So I'll just flip back to that, whether anyone wants to ask any questions. What's the best way? I stop sharing, or?
I think, Clive, I suppose what you're looking for is some feedback, or if there's any difference to what your position is for the feedback to the LGA, and then what do we look at doing now, and for council to consider that, which with a report would come to July. So if you go to the last slide, Clive. So we've had one request. What I'm hearing, Clive, is you're suggesting we do something similar to what we did with COVID and the floods. Do you want to just give that quick summary, and council can give us some guidance? Obviously, no decisions will be made here.
Yep. So probably, I've put some dates in there. Look, I don't think anything, the state government, by the time they get approval from the Treasurer, etc., that probably nothing would occur until on or about the first instalment date, that instalment payment that we have, which will be on the first Friday in September. So if council could consider looking at putting in the rate notice an application for primary producers to have their rates deferred until possibly 3 or 4 months. It's a bit silly to defer it up to the first Friday in September, because that's when only rates are due. In saying that, there would be a number of people, primary production people, that would have arrears at this stage. So that would help those people that haven't paid, if we would allow them to put in the application till then, with the rate notice, and then we would be able, then council could stop fines and interest on those assessments as soon as we receive the application back. So I suppose aligned to what we've done previously, council could consider allowing a period of possibly 3 or 4 months until this LGA proposal has gone to the Treasurer and some feedback's being received.
So questions, comments?
Yeah, that sounds fair enough to me, Clive. I just had a query about their condition, like their proof of being a primary producer. Is the PIC number and the designation of their titles of land enough of proof? Because with a hobby farm, they have a PIC number, and if they want to sell stock, sale yards or over the hooks or whatever, I'm just wondering whether the ABN should be in the equation as well, because, and Simone will know the answer to this. As far as I'm aware, an ABN, that particular number, has to be allocated to a certain business type. And so I'm just sort of wondering whether that ABN should be a requirement of proof of being a primary producer alongside the assessment of the land and the PIC number.
I think anyone can get an ABN. Is that right, Clive?
Yeah, any business can. Whether that's, I'm not sure whether we can actually tell the type of business. And I suppose I was going to have a question back to Councillor Schultz. As far as the PIC number, me sitting here in my office, can I go to a website and validate that or not?
That would have to be done through PIRSA, I would assume. And as far as the ABN, well, I'm sure that that an individual ABN number is allocated to a certain business type. and the ATO would know that.
Yeah, so look, that's something I can have a look to see whether the type of business.
Councillor Barber? So we'll
is-
take that on notice, Councillor Schultz, we'll have a look at that.
Yeah, look, I was just going to refer to Ros because Ros is closest out of all of us to what's actually going on. So I just wanted Ros's opinion on the whole situation.
Yeah, my opinion is this drought sucks.
Any other comments? Fair comment there. Fair. Councillor Myers?
Yeah, just a comment that I support everything Ros is saying. We need to weed out the people that have just got a hobby farm, you know, and they've probably got a full-time job in the city at the same time.
Can I challenge that? Just because I know people that have farms and maybe have reduced them because of the way our land has been over the last 10 odd years. And one that I know, both have full-time jobs basically to support the farm. So they're still struggling because feed prices have increased by so much. So if this is a system where the government's helping with the interest, why would we want to not help some ratepayers but help others?
Yeah, I definitely think we need to be doing something, whether it's similar to Coorong or maybe not that far, but we can't seem to be sitting on our bum. I mean, I drove from Cadell to Manham this morning. I went Sedan Cambrai way. I didn't see any blades of grass anywhere. I come back the other side. The only green I saw was maybe the odd central pivot that's being irrigated. I mean, the sheep are almost eating dirt out there, so I don't know what the farmers are eating.
Not much.
Yeah.
To get back to Simone's point, I guess it comes down to with the hobby farmer type situation, has primary production been their main income for the last X amount of years, like even prior to the drought? If it hasn't, then they're hobby farmers. That's it. It's whether they have in the past relied on that land to live. Got me?
I'm assuming, Clive, rightly or wrongly, I'm assuming that as the state government is looking at this scheme, that they would have definitions of who would be eligible for their scheme, which we could piggyback onto, I would have thought. If they're talking about rebating, deferring council rates for primary producers, they must have some definition of what a primary producer is.
Yeah, so you know, once again, it falls back to you want a scheme that doesn't cost you more to administrate it than you're actually giving it out. So you know, what's being proposed is, you know, just the PIC number, and that the land use is primary production. You know, we have got a clause in the Local Government Act that, you know, we can put in there that there is a fine if someone gives us false or misleading information, and I think it's a fine of $5,000. So you know, we can kind of make the form like a declaration, and it's got that that clause in there to say, look, it's not flippant that you're just, you know, signing a piece of paper and not having to pay their rates for a period of time without any fines or interest, and that there is, if you give us false and misleading information, there is a mandatory fine with that. So, and probably our mayor has probably brought up previously that there is some doubt that some of the primary production land is actually used for primary production, and it might be used instead for residential and a couple of motorbikes instead. So you know, we could make up a quite a simple form, and to me, you know, unless we've got the expertise of or the information, it would be something very simple, such as, you know, a PIC number, the ABN, and a small declaration that they have been materially affected, financially affected from the drought, and it's affected their lifestyle or something like that, and have the clause that false or misleading information will incur a $5,000 fine. So
That sounds good, Clive.
Any other questions or comments? So, Clive, you'll do a report to confirm what we're going to do for the July council meeting.
yeah, so I'll propose a report along those lines.
So if there's any, after this presentation, if anyone's got feedback on these questions that the LGA have posed and Clive's drafted position, then please provide him that. He has to submit that by the 7th of July, which is what, next Monday, is it? So if you can provide it in the next couple of days, or he'll provide that feedback through that. Yeah, he'll propose a report to do what we've suggested in the short term.
And I'll just send that presentation out so people can review the questions and answers that I've got there.
Thank you. Now, Andy and I have got a presentation. I'm mindful that we're 30 minutes over time and also that we've already lost Councillor McGregor. So just straw poll, would you like us to continue and finish that presentation? Or the alternate proposal is that we could do a special presentation workshop next Tuesday just on this item. So Andy and I are ready to go, but I'm mindful of the time getting away from us as well, and Kirsty having to leave. What are people's thoughts?
I'm happy to go ahead.
Sorry?
I said I'm happy to go ahead.
Yep. Mandy?
Oh, I was only going to say that I'm aware that Kirsty sort of really cares a lot about this particular item, and would have wanted to comment, but you know, I mean, it's up to everybody because this is a briefing, not a decision-making forum. But I know she's just dead keen for us to have time frames and so forth on this topic. But
yeah. So what are people's thoughts? I'm just mindful of the lateness of the night. Is everyone happy for us to keep going, or would you like us to reschedule for next Tuesday?
I think you should reschedule because I agree with Mandy that Kirsty really wants to sort of be part of this, and I think it's an important thing to talk about. Like I don't know how long the presentation is expected to go for, but yeah, I think it maybe should be deferred if possible.
Sure. 20 minutes, but we haven't been great with time tonight, Jen, on all of our time frames.
Yeah.
Other people's thoughts?
I agree with Jen to reschedule.
Councillor Myers?
The only comment I've got is I'll be in Fremantle, and I didn't intend taking the council laptop, but on the other side of the coin, I'm pretty well up with everything you're going to present anyway.
Yeah, and you attended the workshop that Andy ran the other day.
Yeah.
From a timelines perspective, it won't affect our timelines if we do this next Tuesday, because the plan is to have the report to the August council meeting following the engagement workshop that we've done with the committee. Obviously, we want some guidance as well on this topic from the presentation that we've prepared. And I do know that Kirsty is significantly, obviously, vested in this. Simone, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I was happy to go with the room.
Yeah.
Jen, I was worried about getting more time off, but if that was her suggestion that we wait, happy to wait.
It might affect our little meeting on next Tuesday, but see how we go. Yeah, no, that's it.
And this would be the
and
only.
I was at the workshop as well, but
sorry, Councillor Davis.
Sorry, I was just saying I was at the workshop as well. But yeah, I think it's just important and yeah. It needs to
this
be.
would be the only topic, so we wouldn't be late, or we wouldn't be, and would it be better to schedule it for 4:30? Does that work with everyone next week, or 4 o'clock?
Yeah, whatever works for you guys.
How about Councillor Warhurst?
Yep, I'm happy with anything. Just whatever will work. That's easy.
All right, we'll confirm the time. Sorry, Andy, you've had to sit through and listen to Clive's presentations in preparation for our discussion. Hopefully it was informative, but I think that's probably prudent, Andy, given the time and Kirsty's unavailability tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And next Tuesday's fine with me. So, yeah.
All right. If everyone's comfortable with that approach, I apologise that we've gone over time.
Just a thought there, Ben. I will throw the laptop in the suitcase, so I'll try and join you.
Yeah. Look,
I've just
your
got to work
contribution-
out Western Australian time. That's all.
Your contribution would be valuable in that regard. So,
All right.
right. Sorry again about our poor time management. Carol, I hope you're feeling better, and thank you for joining us. And if not, everyone have a safe night, and those people that are traveling, be safe.